Mr. Gu's words were a torch, illuminating Duanfang's heart. There was light in Duanfang's heart all of a sudden, and it was easy to handle with light, and there was nothing left to wander around with shadows. Duanfang reminded himself to give up his big shovel, to give up his mass grave, and to give up his Sanya's appearance. Duanfang raised his head and glanced at the sky. The sky is materialistic. It is high above, concrete and open. It is a faint blue, shrouded and omnipresent substance. However, someone picked up a big shovel and started digging into the ground. This man is Old Haporn. Old Haporn suddenly made a new movement. He no longer looked around the house with a flashlight and no longer fought with the night. He began to fight with the ground. Every day at dawn, Old Haporn locked the gate of the patio, took out his big shovel, and walked around along the fence on the patio, looking carefully. Then he found a target and dug hard at the edge of the wall foundation. He was digging deep, looking deep. Old Haporn still doesn't speak now, but he is full of energy, and he sets up a battlefield in his own yard. This time, the movement is particularly big, almost a tunnel wall, and he launches a people's war by himself. He digs a hole here, digs a hole there, a yard full of potholes. Because he hasn't found it, he has to start all over again. The wet new soil is piled up everywhere, and the family has no place to even put their feet. This time, Old Haporn is really crazy. In the words of Xinglong's mother, his only undone is eating people. In fact, Old Haporn is not crazy at all. On the contrary, very calm and very organized. He is just looking for one thing. He wants to find that thing. He must find it. Xinglong's mother is sitting in the main room, swaying a banana fan, looking at the lively Old Haporn on the patio, smiling and smiling in despair. The two loose tits on her chest were swaying from her laughter. Damn it, you old man, let's see what you can do. How could you not die? Looking at the mess in the yard, Xinglong was full of worry and wanted to tie up his father several times and stuff him under the bed. But his mother stopped him and said, "Let him go. He's trying to die. I can see that he's been around for a few days. As long as he doesn't eat people, let him go. This person can be pulled back." Xinglong has been staying at home these days, not going to CMS. Talking in detail, Xinglong is afraid of staying at home and is unwilling to face his father. However, in comparison, what he is more afraid of is cooperative medical care. He was afraid of the hanging bottle, of the dropper, of the soda. As soon as the soda was opened, Sanya came out in white. Sanya was killed by him. Killed by him. A barefoot doctor pouring soda into a patient's veins is no different than a pig slaughterer putting his blade down in a pig's trachea. Xinglong's heart is extremely restless these days. His guilt toward Duanfang is still second. The key is that Sanya always follows in his footsteps. When Xinglong is walking at night, he always feels that someone behind him is following him, and she follows him every step of the way. Actually, there is no sound, but precisely because there's no sound, it is conclusive. Sanya was like this when she was alive. She walked lightly, like wind, like a shadow, and like ants. Now that she is dead, her footsteps are even harder to detect, which is evidence that Sanya is stalking Xinglong. The only thing that can comfort him is Duanfang's side. Xinglong never thought that Duanfang could wipe his ass cleanly for him without leaving any trouble, and he was very loyal. However, after all, he owes Duanfang. This is a heavy one. Xinglong wanted to kneel down in front of Duanfang and fulfill his wish. But Duanfang did not show up. When he thinks about it, Duanfang still doesn't want to see Xinglong. Why would Xinglong want to meet Duanfang? It would be difficult in the future. How to get along? After all, Sanya is a troublesome girl who troubles herself when alive and troubles others when dies. What are you doing, Sanya? Why can't you let others live a better life? Xinglong feels that he is wronged, so wronged. Xinglong sat beside the square table. Xinglong looked at his father on the patio. His back was shiny with oil. Xinglong thought, it's all this person. It's this person who messed up. If it weren't for him, why would Xinglong be so confused? And how could such a life be caused? This sudden flash of thought angered Xinglong. All of a sudden, Xinglong suddenly stood up, rushed into the patio, and beat his father for the first time in his life. Xinglong pushed down old Hapor. Dig, dig, dig! You are looking for a soul! Old Hapor was lying in the mud puddle, facing up like an old tortoise, turning over. Xinglong looked at his father and was a little regretful, as he was worried that his father would jump from the ground, carrying a big shovel and killing him. This time, old Hapor didn't. He was covered in mud and water, and he didn't mean to fight back at all. On the contrary, he was very afraid. This discovery surprised Xinglong, but most saddened. Father is old, with no blood. Old Hapor lay on the ground, looked at his son timidly, and begged in a low voice, Son, don't tell anyone. I'm looking for a soul. The son shook. A chill rolled through Xinglong's heart, and he turned his head away. Old Hapor is indeed looking for a soul, and he has been looking for it for more than half a year. It's just that he didn't say it, and the family didn't know about it. It's been a long time saying this. It was around the Spring Festival of 1976 when old Hapor had a dream, which was with Wang Erhu. Speaking of which, old Hapor often dreamed Wang Erhu, but every time he was scolded by old Hapor. Wang Erhu then obediently walked away. This time was different. In the dream, Wang Erhu came around from behind old Hapor. Wang Erhu said to old Hapor, Old Hapor, the year of dragon is here. It's been 30 years. Old Hapor remembered that the year Wang Erhu was guillotined in the Earth Temple was the year of pig, and the year of dragon came again in a flash. Isn't it a full 30 years? Old Hapor said, Fuck you. Wang Erhu said, Should you pay me back? Old Hapor said, Fuck you. Wang Erhu said, It's been 30 years. It's time to pay me back. Old Hapor smiled and said, Pay you what? Wang Erhu said, The house and the head. Old Hapor woke up, sweat all over. Something big happened to old Hapor that night. Of course, no one knew that he had hit a ghost. If it wasn't for old Hapor who hit him personally, he wouldn't believe it at all. This night was no different from usual. The only difference was that the commune screening team came to the village to show a movie, and all the people gathered on the school playground, leaving the village very sparse. Old Hapor didn't watch movies. He stayed at home alone, smoking his cigarette pot slowly, Just after 9 o'clock, old Haporn knocked the smoke pot on the sole of his shoe, got up, and went to the hut. Old Haporn has a habit. Before going to bed, he likes to squat in the pit and clean himself up like a summary of his day. Old Haporn went out the door, shook up the cotton-padded jacket draped over him with his shoulders, walked around the small bamboo forest behind the house, came to the hut, untied it, and squatted down. Many people can't poop once they get old, and it takes more effort to poop than to give birth. Not for old Haporn. He poops very smoothly, with an effort, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and a lot of results immediately under his ass. But tonight was weird. He couldn't poop, no matter how hard he tried. Old Haporn had to squat there and wait patiently. The small bamboo forest was dark, and the dry bamboo leaves rubbed against each other in the winter wind, making a ghostly sound. At this time, the wind blew the sound from the movie in the distance. Little by little, a gunshot, a mourning, and someone must have been killed in the movie. Of course, people have to be killed in movies. How can there be a movie in which no one was killed? The winter wind made the distant horns extraordinarily strange, whirling and gloomy. The surrounding area of the canal was exceptionally silent, except for the rustling of bamboo leaves. There was no movement from the darkness. Old Haporn was patient, just closed his eyes and tried desperately. The hard work paid off and finally came out a little bit, and after pushing it for a long time, it was a little bit again, like donkey dung balls, and there was no joy at all. After finally pooping, old Haporn closed his eyes and sighed, and stood up. Something was still incomplete and undone. He wanted to squat down again and open his eyes. That's when something horrible happened. In the darkness, there was a man standing in front of old Haporn, who seemed to be standing there all the time. Straight, tall, wearing very long pajamas, just blocking in front of old Haporn. The face was blurry and shadowy, which was only an outline, less than a foot away from him. Old Haporn was agitated. He held his mind for a moment and blurted out, "Who?" The man did not speak or move. The scalp of old Haporn suddenly tightened, and he asked again, "Who?" The man remained standing, motionless. Old Haporn reached out his hand, trying to shove him away. The accident happened at this time. The hand of old Haporn was empty. That is to say, the person in front of him is a person who does not exist. The pants in old Haporn's hand slid all the way to his feet, and goosebumps were all over his body. Old Haporn didn't tell anyone about this, but old Haporn knew that he had hit a ghost. Old Haporn never believed in ghosts. However, seeing is believing. Whether you believe it or not, you have to believe it. After going to bed, old Haporn was quite frightened. He hid the dry smoke pot and secretly said to himself, "It must be dazzled. It must be dazzled. How come there is a ghost?" To prove this, the next night, old Haporn picked up the flashlight, walked to the side of the ditch on purpose, and coughed. The cough was short, but rather severe, beyond a normal threat. Old Haporn plucked up his courage, walked to the ditch, turned on the flashlight, and lightened the small bamboo forest, even the manure pond. He relieved, took off his pants, and squatted down. This time, old Haporn did not bow his head, but held his head up and kept looking. He wanted to see how this ghost came to him step by step. Old Haporn came prepared. As long as there was movement, he would immediately press the switch of the flashlight. If there are ghosts in the world, the ghosts must be afraid of the light. As long as there is light, it will have nowhere to hide, and its true form will be relieved. Old Haporn didn't poop anything. Nothing was out. But when Old Haporn stood up, Old Haporn knew that he had won. There were no ghosts in this world. His eyes were dazzled last night. This expedition is meaningful. This expedition means such a thing. From now on, the squatting pit of Old Haporn is no longer a squatting pit, but from victory to victory. Old Haporn once again looked around with the flashlight, and everything was fine. All is well. All is well. Old Haporn turned off the flashlight, put his arms behind his back, and headed home. When he was about to leave the pigsty, Old Haporn did not believe in evil, deliberately did not turn on the flashlight, and turned around again. This time of turning around has completely changed the future of Old Haporn. The turnaround this time proved disastrous. In the same position as yesterday, Old Haporn clearly saw a tall man in long pajamas, shadowy, motionless, silent, shaking a little in the winter breeze. Old Haporn forgot the flashlight in his hand, but in an instant the soul had already flown out. Old Haporn immediately turned on his flashlight, and the place where the white coat stood was illuminated, but there was nothing. Old Haporn's silence started after the Spring Festival, and no one in the family paid attention. Since March, Old Haporn's words have significantly decreased. The person is old and his tongue is lazy. Who cares? On the contrary, people in the family discovered the abnormality of Old Haporn from other aspects. The first thing is that Old Haporn never squatted on the pit anymore, but sat on the bucket toilet, officially, every night. Xinglong's mother was unhappy with that. Is the toilet for men to sit on? Huh? A big man, so old, sitting on the toilet like a woman. What does it look like? Tell me, what does it look like? Big men are not women. Their shit smells, pee urinates, and fart noises can't even be held in 3-tiled houses. Can't you take a few steps and go out into the yard and poop into the hot? You're not lame and you're not blind. Xinglong's mother couldn't bear it any longer. Finally, she gave Old Haporn no face, got angry, and said irritably, I don't need it anymore. Here it is. You dump the toilet every day. All of Old Haporn's wrinkles folded together. He snarled and said, Is the toilet yours? Is the toilet your last name? It was unreasonable. Xinglong's mother almost choked to death. For a toilet, she can't quarrel, can't say anything, can't say it at all. What decent family would quarrel over the toilet? Can't say it. She cried 3 or 4 times sadly. The second one is the flashlight. In the middle of the night, while sleeping well, he suddenly sat up, pressed his flashlight, and lightened all over the house. What do you think this family has? Another is Old Haporn's self-talk, which is very rare, but has to be repeated. But no one could hear what he was saying. Old Haporn thought deeply. He knew that Wang Erhu had returned, and his ghost had returned. It's been 30 years, and he still came back eventually. Old Haporn certainly doesn't want to meet Wang Erhu, but Wang Erhu insisted on getting into Old Haporn's dream. So there was no way out. You can stop your dream, and no one can stop it. 30 years. It's time to pay me back. House and head. The problem is very clear. Very simple. It is the issue of return or not return that stumped Old Haporn. Between return and not return, Old Haporn was fatigued. Day after day, month after month, it hurts. Of course, it started with not return. What to return? It's a joke. But not returning has the problem of not returning. It is always getting dark, and when it is dark, you always have to sleep. When you sleep, you always have to dream. When he thinks of dreaming, old Taporn is short of breath. That is equivalent to building a road for Wang Erhu. As long as old Taporn is dreaming or sleeping, Wang Erhu will come back from the road built by old Taporn, staring at old Taporn, staring at him and asking him to return. This is too tormenting, even more comfortable than death. Old Taporn changed his mind and decided to return, as old Taporn believed that as long as he returned, he will be at ease. Even if Wang Erhu sits on the threshold of old Taporn's house during the day, old Taporn will no longer panic anymore. But how to return? What to return? Where to return? These are all questions. Old Taporn was confused and got into trouble, as no one had ever told him how to do such a thing. Old Taporn can only delay. Delaying one day is one day. But Wang Erhu is pushing. He came to the dream of old Taporn again and again, pushing step by step. This person is so extra that does not let him breathe. In fact, it was old Taporn who held his own breath. It is counted from the day when old Taporn sued Wang Erhu. That is to say, from the day when Wang Erhu was cut. In other words, from the day when old Taporn lived in the 3 big tiled houses, the mind of old Taporn has never stopped. His heart has been lifted by something. It is hanging in the air, never touching the ground, and shaking. Old Taporn has old Taporn's way, and he is motivated. He tried his best. His heart, he has been and will always be on the most solid side. He always warned Wang Erhu, I am not afraid of you. We have many people, and most importantly, we are powerful. But Wang Erhu is a cunning man. When you are crowded, he hides. When you are a little inattentive, he appears from the dark corner, and suddenly, sneakily, he provokes old Taporn all at once. As soon as the provocation is over, he runs away and hides in a place where never can be named. Then he appears again. He retreats when the enemy advances, and he advances when the enemy retreats. He goes ghostly. Wang Erhu is dead. Long ago, but Wang Erhu is undied, always undied, and will always live in the heart of old Taporn. Old Taporn is afraid in his bones. Calling heaven gets no response, and calling the ground got nothing. On April the 9th, 1976, old Taporn couldn't hold it anymore. He hanged himself. In the main room of the big tiled house, he tied the hemp rope to the roof beam, made a live buckle, and put his head in it. There was no sign in advance. Actually, old Taporn thought thoroughly. He decided to pay. He decided to pay by hanging himself. This pay is clean, mainly because the location is good. Old Taporn is actually a smart person, and he knows how to figure out people's minds. He chose to hang himself in the morning, which was very smart. At that time, who would have imagined that someone in the family would be hanged? When the family members started working with just a bag of cigarettes, old Taporn could pay off his 30-year debt in a lump sum. The debt has its owner, so he went ahead. He can earn 3 large tiled houses for his children and grandchildren. Inexpensive and worth it. People are not as good as God. No one expected the eldest son of old Happorn to come. The little guy saw the hanging grandfather through the door and immediately came to the alley, screaming in a milky voice. Old Happorn did not die, but became addicted to one thing and fell in love with hanging. Things are often such a coincidence. The second time, he was discovered by this little grandson, and old Happorn was saved again. Old Happorn opened his big palm and stroked the grandson's little face. He smiled and said, "Just don't let Grandpa pay the debt. Good boy, like our Wang family." Continued to hang several times. Old Happorn did not die. His mind was alive again. He was originally determined to die, but the grandson didn't let him die, which means God didn't let him die. He didn't die a few times, so old Happorn changed his mind. He didn't want to die. He didn't want to pay it back. He was going to fight Wang Erhu again, and he was going to dig Wang Erhu's spirit out of the house. Yes, dig it out. Don't you often come to my dreams? It means that you are not far from this home. Is it under the ground or in a crack in the wall? Is it next to a tree root or in a well? It has to be dug. When you are dug out, Wang Erhu, I'll be rude to you this time. I don't need to cut you with a knife. I'll cut you into tens of thousands of pieces and then burn you with fire, burn you into ashes, and burn you into smoke. I see if you are coming." The farmers never refer to the beginning of fall as the beginning of fall, but as biting the fall. Why? Because the summer heat is too heavy. When the beginning of fall comes, they must hydrate their bodies. So they grab a melon at the beginning of fall and take a bite. This bite is a sign that fall is on time. At some time in Beijing time, it is here. In fact, such a ceremony is too wishful thinking. For many years, the fall has been bit, but it is still hot. The farmers call such a hot fall, fall full. You don't even see the face of God. Don't you think you are foolish? In addition, there is a situation along the way. In summer, there is a lot of rain, so the fall is cooled by the rain. When the fall comes, the sky is on fire. The farmers call such a fall, fall tiger. How awful the counterattacked tiger tail is, needless to say. The fall of 1976 was a fall tiger. The people of Wang village were afraid. It's not that the people of Wang village are squeamish. Instead, there were instructions from the top to plant double cropping rice. The so-called double cropping rice means that the rice is harvested and then planted for another season. So the days for the fall harvest are too tense and too tiring. Every second is extraordinarily precious. Why saying that? For example, if the fall starts at 8:47 p.m. on the 7th, your double cropping rice must be planted before 8 p.m., not even 9 a.m. on the 8th. This is God's strict order, kill without mercy. There is a reason that the seedlings cannot see frost. As soon as the frost comes, God immediately turns his face, and the rice ears can no longer be grouted, and they would all return into shriveled rice. You can only receive a handful of grass, a handful of chaff. You don't get a grain of rice. But planting rice is not just about planting. It is not like sleeping with a woman, opening the thighs, stretching the belly, and inserting it. Not so convenient. You have to cut the early rice in a rush, then cultivate the land in a rush, and irrigate in a rush. After the irrigation is completed, then level the pond, and then it is the turn to plant the rice. The ancients sighed, "Who knows what the food in place? Every grain is a toil." The hardship is that you have to snatch with time. If you win the snatch, you will win this year, and if you lose the snatch, your year is gone. What is eating by looking at the sky? What is relying on the ground to eat? If you don't understand the fall harvest, you will never know how high the sky is and how thick the ground is. Chairman Mao led a revolution, which was called the Fall Harvest Uprising. Listen to how smart he is. Many people are unconvinced and want to wrestle with the great leader Chairman Mao. No way, you can't play with him. How can you fight against the peasant? The fall harvest is such tearing. If you meet the fall tiger again, you will still have a life. Even the little girls missing teeth know how powerful the fall tiger is. When they play the attendants in the empty village entrance, they sing like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Kill the tiger or fall. The tiger doesn't eat your kids, but burn your ass. Ass on both sides. Women hold up half of the fortunes. Women can hold up half the sky. Yes. The fall harvest has just started. Wu Mailin was in the field for a while, and in the threshing field for a while, she literally holds up half of the sky with her flesh and blood. Wu Mailin is accustomed to taking the lead, cutting rice, picking, threshing, raising fields, plowing, irrigating, leveling pounds, transplanting rice seedlings, and doing everything. In a word, she is a man, not a woman. There are no days and nights in the double season. Now, Wu Mailin doesn't go back to the brigade to sleep much. Every day she eats in the fields and sleeps on the sidelines with her comrades. Wu Mailin hasn't had a decent night's sleep for 4 days and 4 nights in a row. She is so sleepy that she takes a nap for 2 or 3 hours at a stack. Wu Mailin's hard work this year is different from the past, and it can be said that it happens for a reason. The fall harvest just started, and an astonishing big event happened in one village. Demon of the world, this person jumped out and went to work. It was not an ordinary job, and as soon as he appeared, he showed a strong subjective initiative, was very high-spirited, and had a revolutionary and desperate look. Wu Mailin was surprised and became vigilant. What is this shrunken turtle doing? After observing him for several days, she also specially arranged for 2 secret agents to follow him all the way. The agents' report came back. True, not false motivation. This was even more abnormal. Being active is not for her. Why should he be active? This person who is so lazy that turns into flesh cannot truly fall in love with labor. Nope. There must be something hidden inside. It's so annoying. But there is one thing, no matter whether Demon's motivation is true or false, Wu Mailin reminded herself that she cannot lose him, never fall behind him. He is active, and Wu Mailin will be more active. He is not afraid of hardship, and Wu Mailin has to show that she is not afraid of hardship. If he dares to die, Wu Mailin definitely dares to die. Can't lose to him. This is related to the image of a party member. Therefore, Wu Mailin's fall harvest this time was a bit fatal, and she was so active that it was almost cruel. Sometimes, when she can eat, Wu Mailin just doesn't eat, and she can sleep, but Wu Mailin just sticks to it and doesn't sleep. In one village, all people who love labor know such a truth, which is the famous inverse proportional relationship. The less a person takes his own body seriously, the more he shows his love for work. Think about it. If a person doesn't even love his own body, then it's not the love of work, but the love of what? Wu Mailin hadn't slept well for 4 days and 4 nights. She gritted her teeth. In fact, she could hold on, but there was something wrong with her belly. The pain was so bad that she couldn't take it anymore. Wu Meiling knew that her period was coming soon. Wu Meiling thought that this unlucky thing was not early, not late, always running out to make trouble at the critical time. Wu Meiling couldn't hold on anymore, handed the rice bundle to someone else's hand, pulled off the square scarf above her head, and got off the thresher. It was late at night when Wu Meiling felt the darkness, returned to the brigade headquarters, and lit the lamp, but her throat was smoking with thirst, and she wanted to drink a sip of hot water. Wu Meiling supported the wall, bent down, and shook the thermos, but it was empty. She had to come to the side of the water tank, buried her head in the water tank, and drank desperately until full. When she was full, Wu Meiling let out a long sigh of relief, walked to the edge of the bed, blew the lamp, and lay down. Wu Meiling regretted it. As soon as she lay down, she should have climbed into bed just now. The two cups were still hanging by the side of the bed, but she had no strength to lift them. They can only be hanged, uncomfortable. As soon as she closed her eyes, Wu Meiling's eye lit up instead, the light of a dim lantern. She remembered that it was the lantern next to the thresher, which had been hanging on her left side. And the sound of the motor also sounded. It was the Dongfeng diesel engine of 12 horsepower. Toot-toot-toot-toot, just on her temple, making noises. Maybe she was next to the threshing machine for too long. Wu Meiling was terribly tired, terribly sleepy, but couldn't sleep. That's how people are when they are exhausted to the limit, and when they are so tired that they are about to lie down, their brains are refreshed. Wu Meiling smacked her lips and licked her lips and teeth. The lick was uncomfortable, with the lick and teeth were particularly thick and sticky. She remembered it. She hadn't brushed her teeth for 4 or 5 days. Wu Meiling dared not to lick anymore. She focused on pulling her cuffs up, but couldn't move. She thought to herself that it would be nice if someone could help her and put her cuffs on the bed for her. If he washed her feet also, it couldn't be better. Whom to ask? Wu Meiling let the boys line up in her mind and started to choose. Dunfang raised his hand, so Dunfang. Wu Meiling was lying on the bed, half asleep and half awake, but she was so clear that she didn't even know she was smiling. It's really strange to say that Wu Meiling never thinks about men, but as long as the period comes soon, her body is not stable. She thinks about it. Sometimes she thinks so badly that her body is about to split, stuffy and quite coquettish. This was weird. Wu Meiling began to imagine Dunfang washing her feet. His hands were thick and large, and he wrapped Wu Meiling's feet in his palms. It's like protecting and cherishing. His palms were thick, but his fingers were dishonest, and slowly entered her feet, very carefully, one by one, tightening. It was very itchy and comfortable. Dunfang not only washed her feet, but also brought water, toothpaste, and a toothbrush, and actually helped her to brush her teeth. Wu Meiling looked at Dunfang, opened her mouth, and watched Dunfang put the toothbrush in her mouth. This move was really beyond Wu Meiling's expectations. Her heart suddenly swelled up, and there was wind in her breasts, a sign of wildness and uncontrollability. Wu Meiling suddenly felt sad and wanted to tell Dunfang about all the sadness in her heart. Dunfang ignored her, patted her butt heavily, and said sharply, "Okay, go to sleep." It was rough. But it was a kind of rudeness that came out of pity, the kind of rudeness that came from intimacy, lingering. Wu Meiling was startled and woke up. Wu Meiling didn't actually fall asleep, but woke up with a startle. This feeling was contradictory. But there was nothing wrong with being contradictory. Wu Manling opened her eyes. The surroundings were dark and empty, and there was nothing. A bone-shattered hopelessness poured into Wu Manling's heart. She closed her eyes again. Wu Manling didn't know that there were tears in her eyes, but when she closed her eyes, her tears were squeezed out. Just hang there, like her two calves. They hang there. It was just dawn, and Wu Manling's lower body was hot, and the unlucky thing came after all. Fortunately, Wu Manling slept soundly, and now her body was relaxed as if she had just been loosened. Wu Manling got up, cleaned herself from head to toe, inside and out, and also cleaned up the period. Much better, refreshed again. After breakfast, Wu Manling returned to the threshing field and saw Demon beside a straw stack. He was sleeping soundly and deadly. Wu Manling just wanted to wake him up. Inadvertently, she found that the crotch of Demon was bulging. It stuck out a lot, and it jumped slightly. Wu Manling was puzzled and was wondering. When she suddenly understood, she instinctively stretched out her feet, lifted the straw, and covered him. Looking around, she pushed a strand of hair behind her ear, but her cheeks were already hot. Wu Manling thought in private that he had the strength, but not to work. He used it here. He was not born to be a successful person. She wanted to wake him up, but Jin Long walked up with a swollen head and said, "Let him sleep for a while. Everyone said, thanks to a good example like you." Wu Manling could tell that he was saying good things for Demon. However, it was still flattering. Wu Manling smiled and said nothing. Facing the rising sun, she threw herself into the battle of the new day's double C's. Demon's action was a little sudden, but it wasn't sudden. He still had his own considerations. He really couldn't stay in one village any longer. Mainly, he couldn't go on idle anymore. Tiredness is hard. However, emptiness and boredom may not be easy to pass. Tiredness and busyness are difficult, but they can persevere. They can be relied on and can be counted. Emptiness and boredom are difficult. It has no basis, no head, no tail, nor support on all sides. And day after day, month after month, year after year, makes you really want to go crazy. Now that he thinks about it, Demon made a methodological mistake at the very beginning of the contest with Wu Manling. It is a fatal error. How could he use boredom and emptiness as weapons? Boredom is not a weapon. It is not a weapon of criticism, much less a criticism of weapons. He thought he was getting a bargain, but in fact, he chose the fatal failure. Is doomed. In a forgotten prison, a harmonica doesn't save anyone. In addition to amplifying boredom, making boredom melodic, and dyeing boredom with a mournful color, what else can a harmonica do? He can't stay in one village, can't stay anymore, can't stay a single day. He is going. Anyway, he is leaving. Go to the army. After the goal was identified, Demon became clear and saw the two thresholds in front of him with infinite clarity. The first one was, of course, Wu Manling. The second one was the mass, which was actually one village. Demon decided to start from the second threshold first. He must reverse the bad impression he left on one village. Only in this way can he convince the first threshold, and the mass will not become Wu Manling's excuse. Demon's efforts are all round, not just labor, but first and foremost in his behavior and attitude towards life. Reborn. Since going to work, Demon started to change his way of addressing people. Simply put, like a family. Only today did Demon understand the truth. One village is not a family, but you have to make it look like a family. For example, when you meet someone, you have to call them grandpa, grandma, paternal uncles and aunts, maternal uncles and aunts, elder brothers and sisters, younger brothers and sisters, corresponding uncles-in-law, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, etc. How close this is, because it's your own family. Get mad at them if needed, and when you're done, it's still a family. The biggest taboo of farmers is not one of their own. You are not one of our own, and it is no use if you die of exhaustion. Performance is certainly bad. Not only do you have to put yourself in the home, but you also have to abide by the rules of the home. You have to start with grandchild, nephew child, and maternal grandchild. Do it well, and then you can grow into nephews or maternal nephews. If you do it well again, you will become a brother. The next step is easy, and you will naturally become an uncle or a maternal uncle. When you reach such a field, you are not far from an elder uncle. As long as a person is an uncle, you will become a character. Life will be smooth, and you can call for wind and rain. Of course, you are not far from death. As soon as Demon got to work, he showed a new look. Diligence in hands and feet was second, mainly because his mouth was diligent. The whole person became polite and kept greeting the third auntie and the sixth aunt. People like him, and people cherish him. Isn't a prodigal guy more worthy than gold? His attitude is sincere. To sum up, he really regarded himself as a farmer. That is to say, he really regarded himself as a person from one village. This is what the vast majority of poor low and middle farmers really like. How can they really expect you to do much farm work? How come? The key is that you can't be proud. You have to be submissive. This is in fact the ultimate goal of educated youth going to the mountains and the countryside to receive re-education from the poor, low, and middle farmers. The fifth aunt Jinlong saw Demon doing so well, was joking with him. Demon, you never paid attention to people in the past. Why are you so polite now? Demon smiled very honestly and said loudly, I used to eat shit. Duanfang was not on the threshing field. According to the original arrangement of the production leader, Duanfang should go to threshing, but Duanfang refused. He didn't want to thresh. Duanfang still had a little selfishness in these details, and there was a story here. On the eve of high school graduation, Zhongbao Middle School invited a 75 alumnus, a young guy named Dong Yonghua. Speaking of which, Dong Yonghua and Duanfang have studied together for a year, and he's only one grade higher than Duanfang. He's a very inconspicuous young man, but he is now the most famous youth pace setter in the whole commune. Dong Yonghua didn't sleep for 2 days and 3 nights during the fall harvest last year, standing next to the thresher, and fall asleep standing up. At one point, he stuffed an arm into the thresher, and the whole arm, with skin, flesh, and bones, was all threshed by the thresher. This is how people are. When you lack arms and legs, you will have scars on your body. The scar will shine just like gold will shine. If your whole being is lost, your life will be a scar and your name will shine. Dong Yonghua sat on the podium, his only arm restrained more than his 2 arms, stammering. But Dong Yonghua memorized his speech very well. He spent quite a long time reciting his injury process and, of course, his feelings after being injured. His mouth was like a thresher, and all the golden idioms, attributes, and adverbs spewed out. However, Duanfang did not hear. He kept staring at Dong Yonghua's non-existent arm, reminding himself that he could not stand in front of the thresher at any time. Ironically, Dong Yonghua was an advanced model who gave a report to the 76 graduates, but on Duanfang's side, it became negative teaching material. With Dong Yonghua's negative teaching material, Duanfang would not stand next to the thresher, no matter how. Duanfang has been harvesting rice all the time. Because of the experience and lessons from the summer harvest, when the fall harvest arrived, Duanfang was experienced and sophisticated. In Wang Cunliang's words, it's not that sassy anymore. The so-called sophisticated, to put it bluntly, is lazy. Duanfang has a whole body of strength, but why should he spend all his strength? It doesn't make sense. Force shouldn't be used up. Of course, the rice has to be cut, but who can guarantee that the rice that Duanfang cuts will end up in Duanfang's mouth? No one can guarantee. Since no one can guarantee, why will Duanfang do it hard? Putting strength on the body can't hold him to death. Duanfang learned to be lazy, but no one cared. It wasn't long before Sanya's incident that Duanfang had no mind to work, and he was excusable. Why would he think of her? Duanfang was lying on the field with a straw in his mouth. He didn't even think about Sanya. Sanya is nothing. He can't miss a thing that doesn't exist at all. He is looking at the clouds in the sky. The clouds in July are beautiful. And the old people said it well. July embroiders clouds, in which the July is certainly the 7th month of the lunar calendar, which is August of the solar calendar. The old people said that when July came, the embroidery girls in the sky were dispatched, showing their craftsmanship one by one. As the evening approaches, the clouds in the sky are unique and have a nightmarish change. The sky is blue, very deep and far away, an exaggerated and rendered color. On such a background, the white clouds are piece by piece, big and big. Just to stare at one of them is interesting. You will find that it is not a cloud. It is a horse, a snow-white horse, running. The horse's tail is stuck there, and all 4 legs are in the air. It is a freestyle of unspeakable light and free. Slowly, it didn't look like it anymore. It turned out to be a tiger, squatting there, with its mouth open, looking fierce. A closer look is not a tiger, but a lion. It is a male lion with a huge head. The hair around the head is splayed, so mighty, so majestic. If you are patient enough, you will find that the lion's hair sticks out in 2 parts and nothing looks like it. However, just for a while, the hair turned into 2 thick and long tusks. What is that not an elephant? This is a white male elephant, already old. It is kind, at the same time bright, full of leader's temperament, proud without anger. In the end, the 2 tusks came off and floated away, and the body of the elephant came together and became a tomb. Duanfang lay on the ridge, opened his mouth, and carefully identified the changes in the clouds. The sky is so wonderful. The clouds are so impermanent. Looking at them is really good. After standing on the threshing field for a few days, Wu Manling came with a sickle to the rice field where Duanfang was. Everyone cheered for a while, and the rice field suddenly became a little more active. Wu Manling is the party secretary and does not belong to any production team. Where she goes to work is completely random, mainly to be an example and to play an inspiring and promoting role. In a sense, it also means a little reward. Wu Manling smiled, greeted the villagers without saying much, and went down to the field. Secretary Wu is really a hard worker, except for drinking water once in the middle of the field. She never straightened her waist once. She just bent like that and kept cutting. There was silence in the rice fields, and Secretary Wu didn't speak. Naturally, everyone would not be able to talk. The labor was immediately marked with solemnity and seriousness, which was extraordinarily glorious. The sky was slowly getting dark, and the village in the distance was blurred. Only the shadows of those trees were left, tall, thick, and shadowy. It was reasonable to say that it was time to call it a day. But Secretary Wu didn't speak or stop, and all was too embarrassed to leave alone. This was hard for the little sisters who were breastfeeding. They couldn't go back, and the two watery breasts rose anxiously, and they were slightly painful. The milk couldn't be held anymore, so it swelled naturally and got to big chunks of wetness on their chests. There is only one solution, and that is to squat down and squeeze out secretly. The stars in the sky are already bright. The stars are getting brighter, bigger, and more numerous, and in a blink, the stars are shining brightly. The farmers bowed their backs and were still cutting. What is draping stars and the moon? That's it. All draped on the back. Wu Manling straightened up and sighed loudly. That's it for today. The figures in the rice field suddenly became active under the starlight, and after handling the rice bundles, they rushed to the river. They rushed to get on the boat, to go to bed a minute earlier, to sleep a minute earlier. Wu Manling did not get on the boat. By her way, she called Duanfang to walk back together. And by the way, she wanted to talk to Duanfang about something. Wu Manling is often like this, seldom takes up laboring time to talk to others, just taking advantage of the gap between on and off work, on the farm and in the field, to talk to them. The rice boats on the river went far away, and the waves on the river became dignified and flickered silently under the stars in the sky. After all, it was fall. Some insects were calling, and the empty and open sky was quiet. Wu Manling and Duanfang were walking back against the starry sky. Wu Manling walked in front, and Duanfang followed. This way of walking is bad for conversation, but this is unresolvable. The ridge is too narrow to accommodate two people. It is impossible to stand side by side. It can only be one after the other. Duanfang has always wanted to talk to Wu Manling about being a soldier, but it is inconvenient to speak, so talk about it later. The two of them walked like this for a long time in the dark. Each had their own mind, but the sound of footsteps became clearer. At first, it was a little messy, but later it became the same, with a unified and neat rhythm. Wu Manling had an indescribable feeling in her ears. This feeling is really hard to say. She wanted to adjust the pace to disrupt it, but it can't be disrupted for a while. She can only be more focused on walking. How is this heart-to-heart talk? Isn't this a hurry? Wu Manling had to stop and turn around. Because the turn was too abrupt, Wu Manling didn't know what she was going to say for a while. She just coughed and said, "It's actually nothing." The more she didn't know what to say. The two had no choice but raise their heads and look at the stars in the sky at the same time. Suddenly there was a meteor in the sky. It was extremely bright. It set an abrupt start, was very long, and crossed half of the sky. Eventually, gone. When a meteor in the sky was completely extinguished, Wu Manling said, "Duanfang, are you still sad? Sanya left, and I didn't go to comfort you. You know, I can't say anything if I have something in my heart. It's mainly because I don't know what to say." Duanfang thought about it and said, Wu Manling said, "Don't be too sad. You're still young, and your days are long." Duanfang thought about it and said, Wu Manling said, What?" Duanfang thought about it, smiled, and said, Wu Manling said, "Sanya is actually pretty good. At least, I think she's pretty good." Duanfang looked at Wu Manling in the dark and said, "Secretary Wu, let's not talk about this." Wu Manling suddenly stretched out her hand, pushed Duanfang's chest, and blurted out, "Still calling me Secretary Wu? I will tear your mouth if again." Wu Manling didn't expect that she would behave like this. The tone of her speech was frivolous, and she was surprised. But what really surprised Wu Manling was not her frivolity, but the power reflected in her frivolity. That was the aggressive buoyancy. Like a watermelon pressed in the water, inadvertently, tenaciously, and passively, it came out. Duanfang smiled and said, "Of course, I have to call you Secretary Wu. I can't be disrespectful." Wu Manling didn't say anything this time. She actually wanted to say, but she couldn't. She knew that if she spoke again at this time, her voice would tremble. The field was quiet, dark, and thick, with only the faint light of the stars. Although nothing can be seen clearly, it felt like an immense sky, an expanse of wildness, and a slight breeze. It is fall wind, which means coolness. It gives people a little excitement. Duanfang has been thinking about how to speak to Secretary Wu, but he can't open his mouth. It's actually quite simple. Duanfang just doesn't know how to say it. Seeing that Duanfang did not speak, Wu Manling stopped talking. The night suddenly became charming. It's a little moisture dark, with a smooth yet furry surface, with an open stance that can be touched by hand. It is not an exaggeration to say enchanting. Wu Manling thought the night was really charming. She just didn't pay attention to it. Wu Manling scrutinized Duanfang in the dark. "Don't look at this brat strong. His head is drooping down at this moment. He is shy." Men's shyness is different from women's. Women's shyness is commonplace, while men's is touching. Wu Manling just wanted to smack Duanfang's head and slap him, but held up. The heart is full of water, with a smooth yet furry surface, with an open attitude, soft and rushing out. Duanfang eventually mustered up his courage, raised his head, and said, "Secretary Wu, I want to join the army this year, and I ask Secretary Wu to raise your hand." Wu Manling opened her mouth, but did not make a sound. What came out was a hot breath. She turned her chin over, almost resting on her left shoulder, and the heartbeat gradually calmed down, with its organization, with its discipline. Suddenly, she remembered a person, Demon. No wonder he is so positive. No wonder. The mystery is waiting for me here. Yes, it's fall, and it's time to conscription again. Why did I forget? That's right. Wu Manling said to herself in her heart, "No wonder."